Okay, we'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming and taking your precious time off this morning. I'd like to introduce my guest to start with. This is Aaron Chadbourne. He holds 3 degrees from Harvard. Most of us would give a left thumb to get one. So Aaron's a Harvard undergrad. He studied government at Harvard. Then he got a degree in law from Harvard Law School. And then he's also an MBA from Harvard Business School. He is very active in the Harvard community. He actively mentors freshmen. So any of you looking to apply, I'd strongly advise you to talk to him and get a perspective. He's very actively engaged with the Harvard community globally. Aaron's now going to join McKinsey in Washington, D.C., starting in January. Aaron and I were actually classmates at business school, and we co-wrote a case at Harvard, and that's being taught now at the negotiations department at Harvard. Unfortunately, I'm not the coolest classmate Aaron's had. He was in school with Mark Zuckerberg. So he's going to share some anecdotes about Mark as well through his talk. So I'll start with the first question, Aaron. Tell us how it all began. Tell us about your journey, your childhood. How did Harvard even come about?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank Vibha for the invitation to be here. I consider it a real honor to have the opportunity to speak with you about some of my experiences. It's my first visit to India, and so it's been a very great experience to see the country and to have such a wonderful tour guide and host, but also to have an opportunity to speak with you. So I'm going to try to be a little bit informal. I should also say that anything I talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences. Doesn't represent the views of Harvard. I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm happy to give you my experiences and my thoughts as an alumnus, but it's just my personal opinion and thoughts. It's funny because I don't know that I ever would have thought when I was growing up back home in the U.S. that I'd be talking about Harvard, and I just consider myself very blessed to have had the opportunity to go. I grew up in a small town in Maine, which is a state a little bit north of Boston, about a 6-hour drive from New York, a 2-hour drive from Boston. There are about 2 million people in the state of Maine, and in my hometown, there were growing up, I think, about 12,000 people. So you can imagine coming here to Bombay, it's a little bit bigger than that, I think. But no one from my high school had ever gone to Harvard before. There had been people who had gone to other schools, to Yale and to Dartmouth and to other great top schools, but no one ever to Harvard. And it had been a school that I read a lot about. And I know here, you hear the name Harvard, it's in the press, you read books, you see a lot of the great research, and you see people winning Nobel Prize from Harvard. And it seemed unattainable to me. And I think that, I was always someone growing up that you're passionate about it. You show that you've taken your interest to the next level, and you have depth in your interest in what you've done. And so at that point, I just applied, and I spent a lot of time working on my essay to make sure my essay was reflective of me. Vib and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. We were talking about what makes an essay stand out. What is something that makes it stand out? And I think a lot of us think about the technical perfection, that there have to be no spelling errors and that each sentence has to be grammatically accurate and it has to be done perfectly. And those types of things are important, right? You want to put your best face forward. You don't want it to be riddled with mistakes. But for me, my essay was more about showing someone something about myself, who I was as a person, what distinguished me. And so I wrote a lot about my childhood, about my grandmother that I grew up with. I grew up, again, in a small state, in a small town, and she had a vegetable stand on the side of the road, and that was my first experience with business. It's something that gave me an understanding of how business is more than just making money. It's actually interacting with people. It's about being part of a society.
Can you demystify brand Harvard for us? So Harvard is this, it has this image. It's almost, it's for lots, it's out of reach. And obviously, it's been in your reach and your grasp. So can you just demystify? Tell us about, what is brand Harvard about?
I think, again, I told you when I was growing up, to think that I'd be sitting here and talking about Harvard with all of my firsthand experience, I never would have imagined it either. And I think I always thought that it was this unreachable thing. I think one of the things that makes Harvard as great and as enriching as it is are really the people. And the people are the students. I think Harvard has done a phenomenal job in selecting its student body over the years so that they bring together some of the brightest minds in the world who are most passionate and who have very different interests from each other. Our undergraduate curriculum is focused on the liberal arts. So it's not just all students studying engineering, not all students studying medicine, it's not all students studying business. It's students who have various interests from various parts of the world. And I've been very impressed with the commitment Harvard has made over the last few years to make sure that they can help students from anywhere in the world, whether they can afford it or not, if they're qualified to be able to come, they've been able to give them that opportunity. So they've created generous financial aid programs in order to do that. And they've brought together a collection of people that just enrich your experience. I've always been very humbled by the students and just the minds that I've been surrounded by, as well as the faculty. I think our Harvard faculty sometimes get an unfair portrayal as being, unreachable and inaccessible. Of our alumni is one of the things that sets Harvard apart.
Sure. And having spent 8 years at Harvard, you know the underbelly of the school, the administration, and you're sort of totally linked in with what's going on campus. If there was one thing you could change about Harvard, what would it be?
Other than to make it longer, I think 4 years doesn't seem like enough. When you're in college is such a great experience, right? Everyone liked to prolong it because there's so many other things I would have wanted to do while I was there. I think, Harvard recently has made a big push toward encouraging our students to pursue an international experience. And that's a hard sell, right? Because you only have 8 semesters that you get to spend in Cambridge as a Harvard student. Why would you want to leave for one of them? But all of my friends and classmates that have gone an international experience, that's one of the most defining moments of their life. And so I think finding more ways to help expose people to those international experiences. Harvard Business School this year introduced a module where they actually make their MBA students go work on a company and a project in a different country with some of our alumni and actually launch a business and do an actual business project. And I think that's something I would have liked to have done and I would have liked to have been forced to do because it's, again, so hard. You work all your life to be able to go to Harvard and say, oh, I'm going to leave during part of that. It's a hard thing.
Share some piece of advice for some of the young applicants here. What should they be looking at and how should they approach the whole application process?
I think my number one piece of advice is be yourself. I think a lot of pressure is put on people when they're applying to, create this image and package it up all neatly so that it shows a certain type of thing. But an application, at least from my experience and from what I know for universities in the United States, they want to know about the applicant. They want to know you. They want to know how you think and who you are and what you've done, and they want to see that presented. But it wouldn't be fair for me to put someone who I didn't think would be able to succeed into a situation where they're now not going to be able to do well. They want you to do well, and so they want to see that you have the academics that it takes. But they also want to see that you're driven by something, that you're passionate by something, that you take your interests to the next level, that you pursue something deeply, that you're not just joining 25 different clubs and organizations or working for this company or that experience because you want to get into college, but that you're taking on these responsibilities, you're taking on these projects, these challenges, you're solving some problems because that's what you wanted to do. That was what was most important to you. And they want to understand that. And so in the essays, for example, I think it's really important, as I said earlier, that you show something of how you think as a person. Or in the references that you choose, or in the activities that you want to showcase, you want it to all reinforce the image of who you are. And it's really personal. That's why I think it's important, why I think ReachIvy is a great type of organization to work with. You need someone who has experience going through the process, who understands the way that the application works, how it's viewed, but how you put together a comprehensive narrative, one holistic picture of yourself, where each piece reinforces who you are, because you don't have a lot of space in the context of an application. It's important to think about how each piece fits together, building that picture and building that puzzle. And that's why I think it's good to have an advisor kind of work with you who has a personal expertise that can kind of show you and kind of help you think about it in a different way.
And there's lots of mothers in the room here, so any advice for the moms in the room?
I think my advice for parents generally is trust your children. You have to, if you're the type of parents who are so conscientious to be here at this talk, I'm willing to bet that you're the type of parents who have been very active and very conscientious in the way that you've raised your children. And so you need to put a little bit of trust in them to make some good decisions. Sometimes decisions that you might not have made yourself or you might have not made for them. But you need to kind of trust them and to see it as a partnership. I remember the time when I was applying to college. It's very stressful. And at 17, 18 years of age, to think that this is a decision that's going to affect the rest of your life and to hear it every day from your mom, it's, I think my mom locked me in my room and said, write your essay. You can't come out until you do. I'm sure I was crying and stressed. But I think really, you've raised your children to be who they are, and you need to trust in their decisions. And sometimes they might decide, oh, maybe I don't want to go into medicine, or maybe I don't want to go be an engineer. I'd like to try this for a period of time. And I think it's important as parents to question those